Hello, everyone. We'll start in a minute. Hopefully you can hear the music that I'm playing. We'll give people a little bit longer to go. Then we'll get started. Sure. Hey, Avatar. Hey, Angus. It's Rachel. All right. All right, everyone. Well, welcome to unveiling the open standard carbon removal purchase agreement for durable CDR. My name is Jason Grillo. It's a great pleasure to welcome you to this CDR 30 virtual event. For the next 60 minutes, we'll talk through the ins and outs of this new effort to standardize contracting for carbon removal credits in durable carbon removal, regardless of method. Today's event marks the culmination of almost a year of effort on the part of volunteers in conjunction with CDR.FYI in order to create a new way of standardizing carbon removal contracts. Today, they're very bespoke. This aims to remove friction in carbon removal contracting. So with that in mind, we are recording this session. What I'm going to do is walk through several facets of this contract with the volunteers and participants who have helped make this contract come to life. First, Glenn Morley, then Peter Mayer, and then Alex Rink of CDR.FYI, and then finally Elena Perez-Solis. We'll do that for in total about 40 minutes, and then we'll get to Q&A after that so that you can ask questions of us about the contract and about what this effort means for the durable carbon removal market. I will say to you that this is not the final webinar on this. CDR.FYI is going to host several webinars in the future that will outline what the contract means depending on the type of participant you are in the marketplace. So we'll have a webinar for buyers, a webinar for sellers, a webinar for third-party participants such as registries, MRV providers, etc., who want to learn about what the contract means. And those webinars will go into the nuts and bolts. Today's an overview of what the contract is, what it means, and how we're going to proceed going forward so that you can participate and make the contract yourselves be as best as it can. It is, after all, an open source contract, and we'll get into the details of what that means going forward. With that, this meeting, will, as I said, will be recorded. It'll be available later so that you can view it if you missed something, and we'll get to that. So without further ado, I want to say once again, thank you for participating. Thank you again to the CDR 30 team for hosting this webinar, and let's get started. Feel free to, by the way, put questions into the chat if you want to ask something of us. We'll get to that, as I mentioned, at the Q&A at the end of the one-on-one interviews. First off, we'll talk to Glenn Morley, independent advisor who has been working with the team for ever since this started. In fact, was his notion to think of this. Glenn, let's get back to the start here. Why this contract? Why now? What purpose does this serve in the carbon removal market?
Well, look, there are a number of barriers that create friction in the carbon removal market at its current stage. We know from looking at other markets that over time, these markets develop market infrastructure, but that tends to lag the market itself. And we don't have that luxury with CDR. and we could see a number of areas that really there was no business case for somebody to go do it and make money out of it. And we ran with others a number of closed door events with buyers. And the message we got loudly and clearly from buyers was that they didn't trust anyone. The absence of market infrastructure meant they didn't trust anybody in the space. Um, and that wasn't pejorative in any way. It was just a case of everything was new to them, and they weren't finding the standard tools and documentation that they would normally expect. And one of the items that came out near the top of the list was the need for a standard contract, something that meant that you didn't have to start from scratch. Now, clearly, we have a number of years experience now of transacting on carbon removal. People have created contracts, but more or less everybody has started from a blank sheet of paper, and this isn't helping us. We also have a lack of common understanding of where risks should sit. And the other issue for buyers was that they felt that they were taking all the risk. Now, clearly, if we speak to suppliers, that's not the case, but that's the impression because of this lack of standard practice around contracting. And I think what we've got now is we've got mechanisms for procurement. We have approaches to how we select based on a carbon removal strategy, how we source. But the contracting piece is very much driven by the past history of the supplier and the buyer. So here is, let's bring all that experience from the early couple of years of transacting together in one place. Let's consolidate that and create a baseline that people can use, and that's essentially what we set out to do and what we're launching today.
Great, great. Who would you say this contract is for?
Primarily, it's for new to market buyers. But I wouldn't limit it to that. I think everybody who's transacted and is transacting, this is a reference document that they can use. They don't have to adopt it, but it includes a best practice as we see it in the market, and Peter will cover that later. I think it's also useful to suppliers because suppliers are coming at this often without expertise in this area. They may go to a lawyer or they may go to AI. They're often told they need certain things in the contracts to allow them to get finance. And some of those things will appear onerous to buyers. So I think with a neutral contract, we have something that is fair, that works for both sides. So I think new to market buyers, existing buyers who want to refine their process and standardize that, suppliers who want to start with a benchmark standard. And then I think the intermediaries that operate in the middle, we have a number who've joined us as launch partners who are going to be adopting this contract. So it's really for the market. It's not for the benefit of anybody. It's a selfless gift to the market, which we hope will continue to be developed by others.
Great, great. And we'll certainly get into the, as I mentioned, the open source nature of this when we talk to Peter, Alex, and Elena later, that it's a live document, yes, that can be altered and adjusted to suit purposes. To that end, though, I mean, let's dive in. How do you feel like this fits into the state of CDR today? Just curious to get your take on the nature of the carbon removal market and what, in particular, the purposes for how this fits into where durable carbon removal is and where it could go.
I think it's a brick in the wall of market infrastructure that will be built out. There will be other elements we need. Some of those we've seen have started to arrive. Our launch partners, CDR.FYI, and contributors to this project are providing information. So I think it's one of a number of pieces that come together to help the market develop. I think you made the point at the beginning about removing friction. We hear tales of contracts, the contracting processes. This is after we've decided to buy. We're hearing tales of woe. Contracting processes going on for months and months, often over a year, because people they're not starting from a common point. This is normal in contracts, but I think the nascency of the industry is making that harder. We have an estimate that a new buyer can take up to 2 years from the decision that they need to buy carbon removal through to
Mm,
actually contracting. So if we can take a
mm.
chunk of time out of that, that's good. And remove that friction a little bit, because I'm assuming that some people will get lost along the way. So it's a small contribution to the enormity of getting somebody who's new to this space through to a contracted carbon removal purchase. But I think it makes a small contribution to that in reducing that friction, hopefully.
Great, great. And maybe just describe I guess the nature of the team that we've assembled here, if you have a minute.
I'll give you a minute, Jason.
Sure.
Well, I think one of my ideas post carbon gap was that actually we needed to do better at using the talent pool and experience within the carbon removal industry. When I joined it, I was sold a vision of building a system and doing that differently. And what I saw was there was lots of good stuff going on, but the nature of this meant that commercial considerations and personal considerations were getting in the way. And what we've assembled here is a number of individuals who bring pieces of the puzzle together and have been willing to give their time. And I rather hope that this model can be replicated for other areas. That's the idea, at least. And maybe refined slightly, but there are many hundreds of people now who sit in CDR with experience. Some of those are not
Hmm.
fully employed, and I wanted to provide a channel for some of those people to come together and address some of the issues that maybe wouldn't be fixed by a startup or a commercial service that would pay
Yep.
for itself. So that was the idea. And the team, obviously, we're very grateful, and we couldn't have done this without legal input. Um, Peter
Hmm.
Mayer has very kindly provided pro bono services to this piece of work. And the intention is that Peter will be joined by other legal practitioners working in this space. Yourself, Jason, very pleased to have you on board, especially given the work you've done in community building. Elena, very much along similar lines, but with a strong emphasis on actually engaging that community with her previous work. Um, and as I say, we've kept it small and allowed this to move quite quickly. And I think the surprising thing is that there were probably many moments in this journey where this may not have come to fruition. But I
Hmm.
think the commitment and tenacity of the people involved has got us to this point today. And we're particularly pleased to be doing this in partnership with CDR.FYI. We're all big fans of theirs. And we wanted a partner that was genuinely committed to the CDR space, who people trusted. People need to trust the place where this is hosted. So thank you to Alex and the team for coming on board and helping with us.
Great. And thank you all for being such excellent teammates on this journey. Glenn, you mentioned Peter. Thank you, Glenn. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Peter Mayer, who has been, as Glenn mentioned, the legal mind behind getting the contract drafted in conjunction with other legal consultants throughout the process. So, Peter,
Hi,
how are
Jason.
you?
I'm all
Hey,
right.
good, good, good. Why don't we just start from the top and describe the general structure of the contract, if you can. At a high level, how does this document work? Again, and before, just to underscore this point, we are going to go through the nuts and bolts of this in a future webinar hosted by CDR.FYI. So there'll be time in that venue. But for now, in a general sense, how does this contract work?
Right. So from a high level perspective, basically what we've done is we've followed, I think, what has been sort of set as a kind of market a common market practice, I would say. There are certain provisions in the contract that sort of require a particular amount of detail and the contract provides sort of certain alternatives in that regard. That applies to, transfer of title is obviously a very important element in any purchase contract. And no matter if you buy CDR credits or anything else, when does the buyer become the owner is obviously one of the key questions. Regarding pricing and payment, the template sort of provides different kind of alternatives depending on what the parties negotiate for a particular transaction. There is more CDR sort of typical language in there around MRB plans. Key element of obviously is carbon credit shortfalls, right? What happens when there is a delay in delivery? Not an uncommon issue in the real world. And there is sort of a detailed, rather detailed remedy provision in there that tries to cover that. Again, that is broken down into various scenarios depending on what kind of delivery shortfall there is and what circumstances have caused that shortfall. There may be different kinds of remedies. And then there are sort of the typical covenants around environmental and safety matters, confidentiality, and those sorts of things. So when we have published it this morning, in case people are wondering, we have broken it down in 3 separate parts. And the reason for that is that one of the feedbacks we got throughout this process is the contract is terribly long, and it needs to be shorter, and this and that. So what we've tried to do is, when we publish this, to break it down in 3 different parts to make it more accessible for people, rather than downloading a document that has 50 pages and then people say, oh my God, this is terribly long, I'm never going to read this. We've broken it down into 3 different parts. One that has more CDR related terms. That's sort of the part 1. And then second part is sort of boilerplate language that you would typically find in any kind of commercial agreement, irrespective of whether it is a CDR purchase agreement or a lease agreement for an office. So there are certain things that are quite common in any commercial agreement. And the third part is the definition sections. And definitions are obviously super important in any contract. There, I find them particularly important in CDR contracts because there's a lot of terminology out there that's sometimes being thrown around as confetti, and then people have different kinds of understanding as to what that actually is. So for 2 parties in a contract to really understand what they're talking about, it's important to have sort of a detailed definition section. So yeah, structurally, we haven't reinvented the wheel, right? It follows sort of the standard you would see any kind of purchase agreement. Obviously, there's a bit more detail on CDR specifics.
Great. And there's been a couple other efforts at creating or publishing carbon removal contracts in the past. How is OSCAR, again, OSCAR, the acronym for Open Standard Carbon Removal Purchase Agreement, how is OSCAR different from what exists today?
Right. So when I sort of had my first contact with the CDR space a little over 3 years ago, I was really struggling in finding sort of purchase agreements or legal documents that can be used in this context. And as Glenn mentioned at the beginning, sort of everyone started with a blank sheet, basically. And that makes it, that causes a lot of friction and delay, and that's obviously not helpful. So there has been sort of previous initiatives. Maybe one of the most prominent ones and one of the older ones is a set of templates that was developed and published by IETA a few years ago. They are sort of incredibly helpful, and they are a great source of material and information. And they were very well developed and thought through at the time. I think they were published a few years ago, so I think there is sort of a common wish that they would be updated at some point in the future. They're still very good, but they are a few years old, and this market moves very fast. Then obviously another one that was very prominent is the Frontier contract that was published a little over a year ago. Again, sort of very, very helpful, but it's perceived by the market as very buyer-centric and very buyer-friendly. It's a very good agreement, sort of with one focus in mind. What we're trying to do is we've basically looked at all of this, and we have asked market participants about their experience. We've sort of used the kind of practical experience that we have gained ourselves in helping and advising on transactions in this space. So we've come up with what we believe is a good baseline, a balanced contract that does not include all the things you could possibly think of, right? There are no most favored nation clauses in there. There is no right of first refusal or right of first offer in there. Because I would think, first of all, I wouldn't really say that that is market standard. If there is a sophisticated buyer and wants to have those clauses in its agreement, that's perfectly fine. They're free to do so. What we have done is something that we think is fairly balanced, works for buyers and sellers. In all fairness, it is sort of a little bit more buyer leaning. The reason for that is because we want to get more buyers into this market. So we need to come up with documentation and legal framework that lowers the barrier for buyers to enter this market and to give them a level of protection without being overly difficult for suppliers, obviously.
Great. And I guess last question for you: how should those without a legal background approach this document? You mentioned that, again, we're specifically breaking up into 3 different parts so that it doesn't appear too intimidating to those who are new to legal contracting. If you don't have a JD, how can you approach this contract?
Right. So we're also publishing a guidebook that sort of has a few explanatory comments to the agreement. So, it explains the rationale behind certain clauses and puts them into a wider context. So this is a great tool for just informational purposes for people. If a market participant, but there are people out there who basically use this already without a JD. They are sort of advanced enough sort of in their CDR market knowledge that they say, oh, we can work with this. I don't need a lawyer to help me amend this. If you're very new, it is obviously important that you run this by an attorney who helps you get through this document and make suggestions. This is also sort of an invitation, as Glenn basically said at the beginning. This is also an invitation for other participants, for other lawyers and market participants to get involved in this process. This is not set in stone. We're not putting it out there and saying, this is how you have to do it. This is instead what this is something, this is what we came up with over the last few months. Take a look, see if it works for you, comment on it. see what should, make suggestions as to what should be improved, what should be amended, changed, added, whatever.
Great. Thank you, Peter. You mentioned a way of people amending it, changing it, tailoring it to their needs. For that approach, I'm actually going to bring up Alex Rink from CDR.FYI, who's hosting the contract on the CDR.FYI site to talk through some of that process and how people can, I think, access the contract and then offer comments and suggestions about how it can be improved. Alex, good to see you.
Good to see you too, Jason.
Yeah. So why don't we just back up for a second and ask, again, CDR.FYI, very, full disclosure, I'm a voluntary contributor to the effort there and have been very grateful for being able to do so. So thank you, Alex and team, for that. But getting back to why is this important for CDR.FYI? The platform has, excellent analytics, and just curious to learn, what does this contract mean for the CDR.FYI effort?
Sounds great. And by the way, Jason, thank you for your contributions to CDR.FYI. And actually, I want to take a step back and just thank the team, the core team who was involved, because this is exactly, I think, what we need in the climate space is individuals who go above and beyond the day-to-day to think what's needed for the community. And that, in a sense, goes to the answer to your question, Jason, which is when you say why is CDR.FYI gotten involved in this effort? And the reason is because it's important to the community. And frankly, we agree with that. We agree with Glenn's thesis from the very beginning. We believe that trust is critical for this market to move forward, and that we believe that standardized agreements are an essential element and component of establishing trust. Trust can be given. Trust is often earned, and having a standard template that is put out, developed by experts, people with knowledge in the field, and Peter has given a lot of background about what went into this agreement, and developed, shared transparently, and made open for feedback for others, makes it a community effort as opposed to one individual party putting it forward. And the more that it's a community effort, the more that it will establish and earn the trust of all parties involved. So the reason that we as CDR.FYI are interested in this effort is that our mission is accelerate carbon removal. And we think that the shared trust, one part of which is standardized agreements, is essential to establishing that trust.
Great. Thank you. So let's get into some of the details here. So how is the contract being hosted now on CDR.FYI, and how do you see that evolving?
So right now, it's being made available, excuse me, in PDF, Word doc, and Google Docs format. I've just published in the chat the blog post. It has a link to the agreements if anyone would like to go there and reference and download. So you can get the PDF format. There are the 3 parts of the agreement that Peter mentioned, and there is a guidebook in PDF format. In addition, we've made the 3 parts of Oscar available in Word doc format for anyone who would like to take those, download them, and as Peter said, have their legal counsel review them and redline or edit them for specific instances in their particular transactions. And then we've also made them available in Google Docs format for those companies who use Google Docs rather than Microsoft. So that's where things are now. When the Oscar team approached us about this, not only, as I mentioned, I gave you the reasons why we were interested in being involved and collaborating in this effort, but we have a broader view on, as I said, engaging the community. And so even though it's PDF, Word doc, and Google Docs format right now, where we would like to go with this is to make it available as a set of web pages on the CDR.FYI website and make it available for easier comment and feedback. We do invite comment and feedback right now. Please email us at any time at team@cdr.fyi. And when you go to the blog with the link that I mentioned, you will see a little pop-up that asks you if you'd like to put in your email for any news and updates related to Oscar. So we encourage feedback about Oscar. We encourage any sort of improvements, suggestions, comments, and that will go not only to CDR.FYI, but more specifically to this core team to review and to consider for inclusion.
Okay, great. And that actually gets into my my other question. How can people gain access to the document? And what kind of feedback are we looking for the document?
Any kind of, well, so gain access to the document through the link that I mentioned. Again, just scroll down in the blog post and you'll see multiple links for the document. But in terms of feedback, I mean, we'll take anything, to be perfectly frank. We're open to all suggestions and comments. This is, again, about a shared community document. Can't guarantee that we'll take every suggestion. There may be reasons why it doesn't make sense for us to adopt. But, you know, the community speaks. And often there are multiple instances of individuals asking for the same kind of thing, and that's obviously an improvement that, you know, we want to make. And it doesn't have to be multiple instances. It could be just one great idea, and let's just act on that. So this is really a case where we want every voice to be heard. If you have any feedback or thoughts, we really encourage you to bring it forward rather than you know, holding it to yourself, or for whatever reason thinking, well, you know, I must be the only one who's thinking this. Anything that you're thinking, bring it forward. We'd love to review it.
Great, great. Thanks. In terms of, you know, culling that feedback and putting this out into the world, again, agree that CDR.FI is an excellent platform for that. What I'm going to do is now bring on Elena Perez-Solis, who's working on the community outreach and some of the feedback structure for the Oscar document as well. Elena.
Hi, everyone.
Hey. So a little bit of background. Why don't you just give a little bit of like who you are, and then we can talk about how you participate in the effort and what the community involvement can be based on your own experiences. So maybe just take a minute and introduce yourself, and then we'll talk about some of the ways that community can engage.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. But yeah, I'm a communications policy professional working across climate finance, strategic communications, and commercial strategy. And I've been recently working with several financial institutions and corporates and how we can unlock more finance towards net zero. And one of the topics that I became very interested in was CDR, carbon removals, and then I came across Glenn and some other people that were very focused in this area and started to get involved in this initiative. So very happy to be contributing to it.
Great. And why don't we describe a little bit how we're getting the document out into the world? How are we, I mean, yes, on the CDR.FI platform, but how can people engage with the document? How can people learn more about it?
Yeah, so there will be an option to sign up for updates and news. So I encourage you to do that as soon as you have the link. But essentially, all the updates will be published directly on the CDR.FYI website, which hosts both the contract and the guidebook that Peter mentioned. So that page will contain the most up-to-date versions, including refinements based on community input. Also, a wiki knowledge library version is also planned and will be added once the technical setup is complete. So the Oscar page on the CDR FYI is a single source of truth for all future updates.
Great. And also noting the Oscar effort is going to have its own small social media presence as well, yes?
Absolutely.
Great. How do you see the people learning about the document in the future? Is it you said the updates are going to go out. We could also, how could we get the word out even more? How can people on this call get the word out about the document?
So now that the Oscar and the guidebook are public, the next step, as we've been discussing, is to gather feedback from the community and incorporate it into future iterations. So we mentioned that this is intentionally an open, iterative process, and there are three simple ways that people can engage from today. First of all, download the contract and the guidebook. They are open, and you can use the template, but just lift only the clauses that you need. And second, use it within your organization. We mentioned like several ways that you can use it, or even referencing Oscar helps move the market towards more consistent expectations. And third, share feedback. We said that already a few times, but this is essential. Oscar is meant to evolve, and it will be based on community input. So every piece of feedback makes the shared baseline stronger. So the invitation here today, and really the call to action, is simple. Download it, use it, and share what you learned, because the more the market converges around the shared foundation, the faster that we will reduce friction, expand participation, and increase that trust that we really need. And also, the more capital and action that we can direct toward real and durable carbon removal.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you so much. So with that in mind, oh goodness, we have about 52 participants and we have some time left here. Let's dive into some questions and answers then. Thanks all four of you for your insights and sentiments on the nature of Oscar, what it means for carbon removal and where it could go. Looks like we've got some questions in the chat. I'm going to start scrolling through this. If you have questions that you'd like to ask the team, now is a great time to put them into the main meeting chat. I'm looking also in the Q&A. Don't see any posts yet, but if anyone wants to ask a question of Glenn, Peter, Alex, or Elena, now's a great time to do so.
Hey, while we're waiting, Jason, if I can just actually a personal story around standardized agreements. One of the reasons this really resonated with me is there's actually two things that come to mind. One is that in a prior life, I headed up M&A for a private equity backed company, and we got a lot of incoming requests for reviewing acquisitions. And one of the standard steps in that process was signing an NDA. And those NDAs became like the bane of my existence. I literally, for the first time in my career, requested to have an executive assistant. And the primary driver for that was to just manage the NDA process because it was such a PITA. And for those who aren't aware what PITA means, it's like pain in the ass. And so every company bringing their particular NDA, which is anywhere from like, 2 to 5 pages, and then going through that, and then our NDA, and then trying to reconcile between what they wanted and what we wanted. And I'm talking about a short agreement. And it was such an unbelievable pain in the butt. And I'd always have to go back to legal, and it would take a long time. So I literally got to the point with prospective acquirers where I said, if you want us to consider this, give me as much as you possibly can without an NDA for me to actually determine whether we have any level of interest, because that NDA is such a hurdle that we're only going to proceed if there's like a really significant degree of fit. And so an entire process engineered around just the NDA and the challenges in getting that legally reconciled. Not only did I find that painful, but when I left that company, I literally thought of starting up a company just to create a standardized NDA for the whole industry and world to accept, like easy NDA. So this really resonated with me. And I'm even just talking about, like I said, a 2 to 5 page agreement. The other one that comes to mind is actually in early stage investing. Y Combinator, found with tons of companies that they're bringing out from their incubator out into the world, or their accelerator, that a lot of those early stage companies were looking for financing, valued themselves a certain way, and the investors valued them a different way. And it was difficult to come up with a valuation for the company that really sort of bridged the needs for both parties. And so Y Combinator came up with the idea of what's called a SAFE, which is a simple agreement for future equity. And that has become an absolute standard across early stage investing. And it's liberated a lot of capital for investment because it created that shared standard of trust by bridging the diverging interests of the two parties. So, like I said, when you, the Oscar core team, came to CDR.fi and said, would you be interested in collaborating with us and hosting this? Those are two of the things that really stood out to me. And then when I think about the complexity of the offtake agreements in carbon removal, and I thought back to those NDAs or the safes, I thought this is a great solution that we'd love to help develop and to get behind for the community.
Right. And picking up on that, Alex, my own personal experience when I was helping run the Air Miners Launchpad, this kind of commercial paper was something that many of the startups requested. I'm looking for a carbon removal contract. Where's the carbon, does anyone have a carbon removal contract that they're using? So so after I departed from Air Miners, this is something that seemed like it was a very worthwhile effort to help streamline and prevent those questions and such from popping up. Oh, looks like we got a couple of questions coming up in the chat. From Federico, can the guidebook be useful for large buyers like financial institutions as well? I'm going to answer that with a hell yes. That it's not just for startups, it's for anybody who is a participant in the durable carbon removal market. That certainly large financial institutions would clearly have their own legal counsel, but this would be a starting point for that. In Glenn's comments, Alex's comments, Peter's comments, Elena's comments, this is a starting point. And simply having the scaffolding and knowing the signposts to look to and a guidebook to help adjust that process, or help understand the process, that is the foundation of what any buyer anywhere, regardless of size, regardless of industry, or any supplier would find useful. Glenn, Peter, Alex, Elena, what would you any color to add to Federico's question?
No, exactly right. I think it is a useful resource for anybody active in this in this market. So it works for small suppliers or buyers and big institutions alike. There are also a number of references there, sort of with additional, with additional sources of resources that people can go to if they would like to dive deeper into a particular subject.
Great.
Yeah,
Charlie,
one thing I'll add, Jason, is that I'm about to post here in the, I just posted in the chat, that if you want to sign up for a webinar to dig in further detail, we're looking for essentially, where the interest is. And so, as Jason mentioned earlier, webinar for buyers, webinar for suppliers, webinar for ecosystem service providers. We can dig into the nitty gritty. So when you ask a question like, can it be useful? Top level, the answer is yes, but there's probably some kind of details in Federico's mind. It's like, okay, well, what about this? What about that? And those webinars are where we want to probably bring up those kind of questions as a buyer. Hey, here are some things that we're concerned about. What is the thinking about this?
Yep. And that actually leads well into Charlie Cornish's question. Has there been engagement with the carbon insurance partners on this?
I can take that. So far, not yet. What we've done is we've spoken to lenders in the industry from a bankability perspective. There are, with respect to a few clauses, there are some sort of concerns that have been raised, but it is not it's not as big an issue as, for instance, with other contracts that are out there. So we've spoken to the financial industry with respect to bankability. The next step would also be to get insurance providers for the carbon industry involved in this process.
I would add to that there is the insurance industry is really important, but the foundation for where I use a risk mitigation tool is an understanding on who has accountability for risks and how that shifts over the life cycle of a transaction. And we want to get a strong foundation on that. So we've tried to establish that in the baseline contract. But I think what you then would do is say, okay, this is a risk. How do I want to mitigate that beyond what I can do through contractual law? So I think there's a logical evolution of this, and I think it speaks quite nicely to the idea of this being a living document that evolves. And Alex's point, this is community owned, it's for the community. One comment to make would be, inevitably, if I'm a lender, I'll look at this and say, this isn't perfect for me. But to Alex's point, if it's only perfect for the lender, then we have a biased agreement for lenders. We don't want that. We want something that's equitable and works across all stakeholders. So what we try to do is find the midpoint here. And I think we can use these more detailed sessions with communities of practice on either the buy or selling side or for lenders to understand how we might evolve, I'll say evolve, not change, evolve the document for use. And the measure should be not that people like it or it's short enough or they like the text. It should be that actually it helps the process of the agreement happen more smoothly, that the legal understanding is embedded in the very first conversations we have around procurement, and it flows through like a red thread. And I just add one final thing, which is some of the largest buyers of CDR in the market, who we appreciate greatly for their leaning in as pioneers, the agreements they're using are quite self-serving and don't necessarily help the people who are supplying them. So we need to do a little bit of a reset here and get to a baseline point that's fair for everybody. And then we can talk about the value of different extensions we might add either through the contract or through other devices like insurance. Thank you for the question.
Oh, great. I'm going to bring up a term that came up in the just now that Joe Kachansky, hey Joe, mentions is bankability, which can mean different things to different people. To be clear, so Joe asks, it seems that CDR buyers will benefit by putting forward terms that create a bankable contract. Could anyone speak to why they would not create a contract that is actually bankable? And I'm sure there's a lot of ideas about why that might come to pass.
Well, I can take a go at this, and then everyone else obviously can add. So depending on what kind of buyer it is, they may have very different kind of interests, right? And they may have very different kind of stakeholders they are answerable to. So if you have to explain buying carbon credits to your investors, who may be venture capital funds, you probably want to look at that the contract protects you best as a buyer. So there is, right, which that gets us down to who bears the risk for what. And then it's not necessarily designed, or some people entering this market are not entering it to advance the industry necessarily. They might do it for very particular reasons that they have within their business model, and they want to be protected against risks associated with buying CDR credits. And that's sort of the primary target. If that is bankable or not, and as Jason says, what does bankable actually mean, is a secondary concern for many. And even bankability, even within, you can talk to two different bankers at the same bank. They may have a very different understanding as to what bankability is in a particular context, depending on the department they're in within their institution. So yeah, why would a buyer not have why don't they care about whether a contract is bankable or not? They may have their own, they just may have their own objectives.
Yeah, if I may, I mean, in my experience with in consulting to companies who want to do carbon removal credit deals, the redlining process about what one person thinks is appropriate to protect their own interests versus the counterparty to protect their own interests. Everyone wants to see the deal get done, yes, but the degree to which people are willing to offload risk to one party or take on certain risks, that's quite variable. And it's not just different kinds of lenders, but different flavors of lenders: an institutional lender, a philanthropic lender, for instance, a venture capitalist. All of these different kinds of financings have different risk tolerances, and what bankability means is different from person to person, and certainly different from supplier to supplier, different from buyer to buyer. So again, with Oscar,
Definitely.
the goal is to get something that can be adjustable and will evolve depending on what people think. Sorry, Alex, you had your hand raised. Glenn, did you want to add a comment?
No, I just wanted to build on that point, which is this idea of having a risk thread going through the procurement process and understanding that. I think some of the ecosystem service providers are already supporting that, but having a much more explicit understanding about where the risk should, who should have accountability for that risk. So this is a nascent industry. It is high risk. So people lending money are taking risk, but there's a risk-reward equation, and clearly the lenders will want to bias that in their favor. I mean, that's what they're there to do, and it's very difficult to have a conversation about what should the common or best practice be for that. And I think this idea of having special, more focused sessions around key groups will be really useful in building out the detail for those groups. And ultimately, a decision has to be taken, which is, are the terms of bankability too onerous on the other parties and therefore acting as a brake? We actually have to find a balance between the two. So I think you're right. Bankability can mean different things to different people. I think we have a process here which allows us to get to neutral, and then to help facilitate the process of trade-off that inevitably needs to happen, so we don't end up in Alex's NDA hell. I mean, an NDA is a simple document, but we can tie ourselves in knots simply because we want it our way. What we're trying to do is have a standard way that sets the baseline and allows a sensible, well-informed discussion using the guidebook and any other specialist information we put around this.
Great. And also, just to be clear, this Oscar is intended to be used in different jurisdictions as well. It's not just it's not European focused. It's not Canadian focused. It's not United States focused. The goal is for it to be used in really any context worldwide. Although, again, once more underscoring that Oscar does not constitute legal advice. Recommend getting your own legal counsel to review. Alex, you had your hand raised for a minute there.
Just a real quick addition on the whole bankability question. I think that it is in buyers' interest, obviously, that the contract be bankable, and it's in their interest because of the relationship and that the relationship succeed. But I would distinguish between sort of like first level interest and second level interest. The first level interest I find with buyers, given where they are, most of them aren't even let's be candid here. Most buyers aren't even sort of really on board with climate yet. And certainly not yet really on board with CDR. And so those that are those venturing brave souls. And given where they are, they're trying to do what they can to assist and get involved with the market, but they're not willing to take on all of the risk. And so the first level interest is, make sure that I'm not throwing away a bunch of money, make sure that I'm not making a fool of myself by investing in something that gets me into a Guardian article. Like those are the biggest concerns that buyers have. And that needs to be taken into account. Now, the second level interest is, hey, if we're going to spend a bunch of time and effort in this particular agreement and transaction, we want it to work out. So to Joe's question about bankability, there's got to be that, how do I mitigate those risks, those first level interests and risks that I've got, while ensuring that all this time that we're investing in this particular relationship actually will succeed and go forward.
Yeah, great. We have a dwindling number of minutes here before the top of the hour, and at which point we'll close the webinar. Any questions, comments, concerns from you, our audience? Now's a good time to put them in the chat. Any closing comments from Elena, from you, Alex, Peter, Glenn?
I think all I would say is a thank you to everybody who's contributed. You see a small group on the screen now, but there are many more who've contributed through their contributions to this process, so thank you. And it embodies exactly what Alex was talking about earlier, which is this idea of a community working together for something better. And I would implore those who've joined the call today to take time to engage in what's been produced, to share it with people who you think it'll be relevant to, and contribute with comments if you have them. And for those who are practitioners in the middle of transactions, then all of the people on this call stand ready to have conversations with you if you want to continue the debate. And do look out for the follow-up sessions that Alex mentioned, where we'll be doing more of a deep dive. But thank you, everybody.
And to that end, Alex shared a link just now at 6:50 a.m. or 6:50 a.m. Pacific time, with a link for people to sign up to be included on future webinars that will outline what if you're a buyer, if you're a supplier, if you're a ecosystem player, one of those three categories will have a webinar tailored to those needs. Other comments? Elena, Alex, Glenn, or Elena, Alex, and Peter?
I'm going to just reiterate what I said earlier, which is thank you to the core team for your, selfless and tireless investment of effort over the course of the last year. These are really extensive legal agreements, as Peter said. We tried to make them as simple as possible, but we're still talking about 35-page agreements, and they are complex, 35, 40 pages. The guidebook is incredible. I really encourage everyone to take a look at that. I think that the legal agreements in and of themselves would be incredibly valuable, but the amount of time and effort that's gone into the guidebook to explain the different clauses, again, encourage everyone in the community to take a look and go through them. So thank you to this core Oscar team for what you've developed and what you've brought to the market. And it's these kinds of investments that, frankly, are going to enable us in climate to get to where we want to go, which is going above and beyond the day-to-day and thinking about what's needed for the broader community.
All right. Okay, last call. Going once? Going twice? Okay, everyone. Well, thank you. I will say thank you so much to the Oscar team, to Elena, Peter, and Glenn. Again, this has been a real pleasure and to work with you all. And thank you, Alex, and to the entire CDR.FY team for being such excellent collaborators in this. And thank you to all the unsung people we have, heroes who we haven't had the chance to mention specifically today, who are experimenting with this contract, testing it, using it, and who are the pioneers of developing the Oscar contract to be that standard that we want it to be. And hey, thank you to our audience for coming here today. I see several people with who, like me, are in the Pacific Coast time zone. So hopefully you got some coffee in you or some matcha tea, and look forward to seeing you in you all in the future at a webinar going through the details of the Oscar agreement and the guidebook, based on your position in the marketplace. Other than that, by the way, thank you to the CDR 30 team once more for hosting this event and for being partners in developing the Oscar plan and for helping us get to this point on November 19th. So thank you all, and look forward to seeing you at an event in the future.
Have a wonderful day wherever you are in the world.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you.